Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Boardmasters with me, Chris Mullins, and today I want to talk about classic board games, really, in that if you've seen any of my footage you'll know that I'm pretty much brand new to the hobby. This time in 2020 I think I owned 4 games and they were basically all bought off IP rather than their game reputation as such. So whilst I've played a lot over the last year, they have generally been sort of cult of the new, highly rated Kickstarters, things like that. So there are a huge amount of classic games that I have never tried, and so I thought I'd do my top 10 classics that I feel that I really should play and that I want to try out. And this is going to be that list, basically. So comment down below on which games you'd recommend on this and which other classic games you would recommend that I look at. And for the purpose of this video, classic means 10 years or older, basically. Although I appreciate one of the games on here has just had a recent second edition launched, but although I still count that as a classic because it's the core experience is still at 10 years or more in terms of their age. Oh, I got my tongue tied there, didn't I? But anyway, let's dive straight into the list. So as you can see on the screen, we've got Catan there, which is probably one of the most famous board games, I guess, in terms of that transition from the Hasbro classics, as I term, like the Monopolies and Cluedos and things of this world. Catan is sort of that traditional gateway gamer game, but it's not one that I have ever tried. And to be honest, it's not one that I guess because of the rating 7.1, which is probably down to the age and the relatively lightweight. When I've bought retail, I've tended to go for things a bit higher rated, but it definitely feels like it's a milestone game that I need to try. And similarly for the next one, Carcassonne, I see the big box on sale often, and this one does tempt me quite a lot, but it's just not one that I've ever pulled the trigger on yet. And again, I think a lot of these games are, well, except for one, there's probably exception of one on this list where I love the theme, but all the rest are themes that I'm not too fussed about, and that's why I haven't bought them yet. But again, Carcassonne is won plenty of awards. It's again a milestone game that probably everyone should try. And this is going to be the worst rated game on this list. I'm getting completely tongue-tied in this video. So Risk, I have never played a proper game of Risk. My mum bought me a copy of Lord of the Rings Risk when I was about 17, I think, for Christmas, but I couldn't get anyone to play with me at all. So I don't know what happened to that. I guess I must have sold it or gave it away or something, or maybe it's hidden up in the loft somewhere. But again, it's just one of those traditional games, and obviously this is going to be, well, it's not the oldest actually. There's one that's much older on the list, but certainly one of the oldest games that, and it just seems sacrilege that I can be in this hobby and not played it. Now, Pandemic, which obviously has been very popular, in particular had a resurgence over the last year for obvious reasons, and it's a game where this is in here as a bit of a technicality really, because I have played Pandemic on Steam as a solo experience, like doing the tutorials and things, but I've never, and I own Pandemic Season 1 Legacy, but I just never actually opened it because the Legacy thing, I've wanted to wait until I've had a committed group to start that. But I've never actually played the physical board game of Pandemic in a group and tried to save the world from these viruses. And again, it's one that I really, really do feel the need and appeals to me as much as anything else. But I appreciate that's in there as a bit of a technicality, but it is one that I need to get to the table physically. And the same goes for Seven Wonders. And this is the one that obviously has had its recent second edition release, which I own. It's still in shrink wrap upstairs. But again, because the new one, I mean, obviously on here it's 2 to 7 players, but the new one removed that 2-player variant because from what I understand didn't really work, and we don't have a third player really. I mean, hopefully now we've got the gaming nights with Chris coming back, we can get this to the table sooner rather than later. But this is one of the first games that I wanted when I got into the hobby last year. Managed to get hold of it for Christmas, and it's still sat there in shrink wrap because I need to get a third player. But now we are on to the oldest one on the list, and that is Crocodile. And it's a dexterity game, which generally don't appeal to me. I've got Kabuto Sumo is the only one that has tempted me that I've got coming from Kickstarter soon. But this is also the one on this list that I am pretty much resigned to the fact that I'm almost certainly never going to play, just purely because of the cost of the board, and I don't know anyone who owns this. I don't know anyone who is likely to ever own it. But then part of me says, 150 euros for a game is pretty standard for what I paid for games on Kickstarter, so why am I resigned to never spending that on a classic game like Crocodile when I'm happy to spend it on... Well, we know the answer to that is FOMO, but still, maybe it's interesting that FOMO doesn't apply to existing games in the same way that it does with Kickstarters, even though the Kickstarters are going to come to retail anyway for the most part. But who knows, maybe one day I will get to flick the discs around that beautiful board and experience one of, well, the classic games of the community, really. On to the next one, which is Twilight Struggle. And this is one really that is here basically on its reputation. It's not a theme or anything that appeals to me at all. I generally have no interest in war games. Probably because, I don't know, maybe they're a bit too real for me, and that, real people did die and lose their lives as part of these conflicts, so playing a game reliving that kind of feels a bit weird to me. But to be the overall 10th best game of all time, it is a game that I need to try out. And even if I don't like it, I can then move on, and it's fairly reasonably priced. I mean, $40 to $50 euro, so £30 to £40. It's definitely something I should try. And but again, because it's just 2 players, it does make me nervous that you have to have someone else familiar with the game. If you're more familiar and teaching the game and have more experience, then I imagine the likelihood is you're going to win, and so you're going to have to play a significant amount of games with the same person in order to have a satisfying game of it. But that might just be my perception. I could be completely wrong about that, so comment down below and let me know if I am. And on to number 8, and this is the one that's on the list that has the license that I do love and just about snuck in on the 10-year. To be honest, I know technically I didn't look at the month, so it could be that it was late 2011 and it's under a decade, but you'll have to forgive me for that if that's the case. And again, the big concern for this one is that it's best at 6. Obviously, it's recommended at 4 or 5, but it's going to be very difficult for me to get 6 to the table, particularly for a game that lasts 2 to 4 hours, because I don't imagine Stace would be able to get involved, and I could maybe get Chris and 1 or 2 others perhaps, but I don't see me ever getting to 6, which is why I haven't pulled the trigger on this so far. But it is a game that I really do want to try, and if you played it at 4, let me know how it plays. On to number 2, the Castles of Burgundy. And again, this is one, not necessarily a theme that I particularly care about or am invested in, which is why I haven't bought it. But I know Alex at Board Game Co. has regularly talked about this game and loves the game, and like Too Many Bones, that is an endorsement enough for me, really. If I generally trust what Alex has to say in his opinion, and he's far more knowledgeable on games than I am, so if he says it's a good game, I will trust that, especially as it's been verified by the community with a rating of 8.1. And it's not too bad a playing time. It's just one of those I've got to pull the trigger on and actually get hold of eventually, I guess. But it is definitely one probably one of the most likely ones on the list that I'll actually get round to. And the final one, Twilight Imperium 3rd edition. I also want to get Twilight Imperium 4th edition, but again, that's probably... I'm going to do a top 10 retail wish list video probably next week, and that may well appear in that one. But it's too new for the purposes of this video, so I'm going to go with the 3rd edition. But again, similar to Crocodile, this is going to be one where the price, I guess, is going to be, and the availability is going to be a tricky part of this. Although those look remarkably cheap, but there may be more on if they're American getting postage across. So I may have to rely on second hand for this one. And again, obviously there's the worry it's best at 6, but can be recommended at 4 or 5. So again, let me know how it plays at 4, because that will definitely sway me if it is very good game at 4, because that's probably the highest play count I'll be able to achieve, especially for a significant 3-4 hour plus playtime game. But those are the 10 classic board games that I feel like I should play. As I said earlier, comment down below to tell me which ones shouldn't I bother with, which ones am I missing, and particularly with Game of Thrones and Twilight Imperium, how do they play it at 4 as opposed to 5 and 6? But that's it for this video, so I'm going to leave it there. So thank you very much for watching. Look after yourself, stay safe, and have a good one. Thank you. Bye-bye now.